Well, welcome to Christ and Culture. My name is Jeff Short, and glad to have you along for the journey today. And what we're going to be doing today is looking at a news article that came up on the internet last week or the week before that, dealing with Hollywood. Now, a lot of people have criticized Hollywood, and most notoriously, it's been the so-called fundamentalist pastors, the fundamentalist churches. They're always railing against Hollywood, and a lot of modern people laugh at that and say, oh, those are backwoods people. They don't know anything. They're not sophisticated. They're not modern. They're still locked into the 1930s and 40s and so forth. So they dismiss them as cranks and kooks. But when you really start to look at Hollywood, when you really start to consider what's happening in this dirty, filthy, immoral, amoral city out there in near Los Angeles, California, when you really look, when you pick up the big rock and you look under the rock, you see all these crawling, creeping things, the corruption in Hollywood. And today we have an example of this, and it's really sickening to hear and to actually read about, and that is Steven Spielberg, the great famous movie director and producer. He and his wife adopted a daughter, Mikayla, and have raised this child up from a babyhood, and now the adult Mikayla is telling her parents that she wants to become a X-rated porn star actress of all things. And the reason she's doing this, she says, is because of the abuse she suffered as a child. And we can look at her environment and we can look out there in Hollywood and say, yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. What a rotten, terrible place to raise a child out in Hollywood. And evidently, the corruption and the immorality and the decadence of Hollywood seeped into the Spielberg family and even touched his children. And so we're going to hear, and I'm going to comment on a commentary by internet broadcaster Stefan Molyneux. And I think that his response really gets to the emotion of this story. When you see children exposed to corruption, when you see children exploited in Hollywood, you know, the famous Me Too movement arose a couple years ago in Hollywood, and the actors and actresses and producers and directors and the executives out there in Hollywood acted shocked, as if, and they're acting shocked because they're actors and actresses, they're acting shocked that there was so much corruption and immorality and sexual exploitation and so on and so forth. They were acting shocked. But we've all known, people who are non-Hollywood people, we've all known that that whole scene out there in Hollywood has been corrupted for decades and decades and decades. And we all have known, and as testimony of the fundamentalist pastors and Bible-believing evangelical pastors of all types of churches have been warning people about Hollywood. And the sophisticated people, like I said before, have always been poo-pooing that warning, but now we're beginning to see in visible daylight how corrupt Hollywood is. So let's look at a presentation by Stefan Molyneux, and I'm going to step in and make commentary to his commentary. So he's going to be commenting on us, he's going to be reacting to it, and I'm going to be reacting to his reaction and to the story itself. And I think that this will help us really get to the heart of what's happening out there in Hollywood. So let's jump into this video and roll the tape and move into this commentary. I think, and I hope that it will be helpful to you in your understanding of the corruption in our world and how we need to fight against it. So let's go.
All right, well, just when you think there are no layers of hell below the layer that you currently reside in, the news just came out of the last couple days. Steven Spielberg's daughter, Mikayla, opens up about abuse by monsters as she announces career as adult entertainer. Steven Spielberg's daughter, Mikayla Spielberg, says she was abused and groomed by monsters outside her family in the past. You know, all of these jokes about Hollywood and pedowood and the high prevalence of child exploitation and pedophilia in Hollywood. This kind of stuff does not exactly help put those rumors to rest. The 23.
Well, I'll stop right here. It is a cesspool, and we're just beginning to see evidence of the extent of that cesspool. I mean, if you look at the movies that are being produced today, if you look at the type of movies that were produced, say, 50 years ago, they were on the so-called cutting edge, and they were pushing the boundaries. But now, after the sexual revolution and all of this immorality, the normalization of perversity and immorality, we are now seeing how corrupt Hollywood really is. And we're seeing the influence of the movies that come out of Hollywood. Hollywood is a corrupt scene. It has corrupt participants in the whole system of Hollywood, and it produces these movies and sends them all over the world to corrupt the whole world. So it's not just a matter of staying in this one spot. It's a matter of the influence of Hollywood is paramount in pushing this immoral behavior that we see now the evidence for directly. So Steven Spielberg and his family now have a daughter who is announcing she wants to be a porn star, a X-rated actress. And you have to feel for the family, but it's part of what Hollywood is all about, evidently.
3-year-old opened up about the abuse in a candid on-camera interview with The Sun, in which she also discussed her relationship to her body and her decision to start a career as an adult entertainer. The abuse, she said, came, quote, from outside my family and not from anybody of notable presence, just from scumbag monsters who were looking at my vulnerability and going, that's the one. I suffered a lot of grooming, Mikayla, now 23, told the publication. Quote, I feel like the abuse I went through wasn't super intense, but it still had long-lasting impact because it had me questioning, what is my body? What is it to have a body and exist in a body safely? Also, what is it to be an emotional human being and not have it taken advantage of, right? So,
okay, before he gets into his commentary, I want to say that it is the result of that 60s sexual revolution where you have kids, you have young people who don't have any clear boundaries, they don't have any clear rules, they are not taught the Judeo-Christian moral ethics. They are not surrounded by people who reinforce the Judeo-Christian moral ethic. And then you have, as a result, massive confusion on the part of young people. And this young girl evidently was surrounded by bad role models in Hollywood. She was surrounded by immoral people. And these immoral people did immoral things, and they broke the rules, and they didn't follow God's will. They didn't follow the Bible. They don't go to church. They don't strive for holiness. And as a result, anything is possible in that environment. And what we see here happening is that she was a part of an environment that allowed for this kind of sexual exploitation and abuse. Even within a famous family like the Spielbergs. And really, it's the corruption of Hollywood. It's the corruption of our culture. It's the breakdown of the Judeo-Christian moral ethic in society. And we're seeing the fruits of it right now.
Child abusers, this is the complex relationship that abuse victims have with their own physicality. Because child abusers use your body to harm you. It puts you in an oppositional relationship to your body. If they hit you, they're relying upon the pain receptors in your body to transmit horrible sensations to your brain, so your body is used as a weapon against you. If you are sexually exploited, if you are raped, if you are groomed, then the pain and horror of sexuality in those kinds of horrible situations is your body being used against you, and it sets you in opposition to the base muscle mass, mammalian physicality that is the foundation of human life, human consciousness, and everything it is involved. The whole question within the West of the mind-body dichotomy, that the mind is one thing and the body is this satanic thing that drags you down, this all comes from child abuse. When you are not abused as a child, or when you resolve that abuse as an adult, your relationship with your body become positive and productive and wonderful, and the mind-body split, the opposition of abstractions to physicality, ceases to be an issue. And of course, it's something that I promoted and talked about on this show for many, many, many years. So this is what it means. What is my body, she says? What is it to have a body and exist in a body safely? What is it to be an emotional human being and not have it taken advantage of, right? Psychological abuse, again, uses the pain mechanisms within your brain to harm you and your experience of being alive. These things are beyond our control. Ostracism activates the same pain receptors in the human mind that physical torture does. So this is all beyond us. You can't control whether if you're beaten you feel pain. You can't control whether if you're raped you feel pain, and you can't control whether you're verbally abused and you feel pain. Therefore, your body is being used against you. Speaking about her decision to...
And that's some good information that we need to remember, that these abuse victims, I mean, you can't blame her, you can't blame Mikayla Spielberg for her situation. She was born, she was adopted into what looked like a really healthy, good family, because Steven Spielberg and his wife had a lot of money, they had a lot of privilege, and it seemed like a very good situation for this young adopted baby to be able to come into a home of an established, successful person. But as we've seen, the baby was born and then subjected to an environment that is hostile to the health of anyone, actually hostile to marriages. If you just look at the divorce rate out there in Hollywood, it's awful, it's terrible, it's probably the worst in the whole nation proportionally. If the couples even bother to get married, a lot of them just live together, shack up, live in sin, whatever it used to be called. Today, it's normal. And then, but especially for the young people, I mean, some of the adults can survive that atmosphere out there, that corrupt atmosphere in Hollywood. Not very many can survive it, but some can seemingly come out of it okay. We know that there are some marriages in Hollywood that have lasted for a long time, decades. But for the most part, the vulnerable people out there are the children and the teenagers and young people. And Mikayla Spielberg is a casualty of the corrupt, immoral Hollywood scene that her father and mother are a part of. By the way, her mother was a co-star in one of the Indiana Jones movies that was directed by Steven Spielberg. I think it was the Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and she was the heroine in that movie. And then the Indiana Jones, of course, was the famous character in the movie, but she was the co-star of the movie. So his wife, Spielberg's wife, was one of the co-stars in the movie that he directed way back in, I believe it was the 80s. But they adopted this little girl, Mikayla, and unfortunately they did not protect her enough from the harms out there in Hollywood.
Build a career as an adult entertainer. Mikayla says she hopes to do some erotica for private customers or for the public and get a dancing license. I got really tired of not being able to capitalize on my body, she said. Frankly, I got really tired of being told to hate my body, and I also got tired of working day to day in a way that wasn't satisfying my soul. I feel like doing this kind of work, I'm able to satisfy other people, but that feels good because it's not in a way that makes me feel violated.
Well, that's kind of a sad way of thinking, but it's a typical millennial thinking. Now, you have to remember the millennial generation is a generation raised on the internet. So they came in to childhood and grew up with the existence of the internet. And as we all know, the internet is a great blessing when it's a blessing. And when it's a curse, it's a great curse. So it has the potential for great good in society, but there's a lot of junk, immorality, sin, bad, just awful things on the internet. And unfortunately, this Mikayla was part of that generation that grew up with the internet, and it's the millennial generation, and the thinking of the millennial generation is it's all mixed up. It's all messed up. And this is the generation that thinks that socialism is really a better form of government, have no concept of the evils of socialism, don't know history, they don't know how to analyze bad ideas and reject them. And so Mikayla is a part of that millennial generation, and sadly, she is thinking now that being a porn star is really what she wants to do with her body, and that if she's going to be exploited, at least she'll get paid for that exploitation, or something. Very confused, very confused thinking.
So there is a lot to unpack in all of this. First of all, she's engaged to a guy, he's her fiance. He's a professional darts player, I think. He's 47 years old, and she is 23 years old. So together they make a 70-year-old, which is not, I think, particularly great. And of course,
a professional darts player, again, if you're going to be looking to get married, or if you're going to settle down and have a family, you want a man that has a job, and you want to have a man that has a steady job and a solid job. And I don't think, last time I looked, I don't think a professional dart player would be qualified to be a steady provider for a family.
Because she was exploited as a child by men, we assume, who were much older, could be women. She doesn't give the gender of her abusers, but there's so much to unpack here that let's bloody well get into it. Well, I can't promise to keep my temper, but I will promise to keep my focus and focus my moral outrage. So first and foremost, of course, if you've seen the pictures of Mikayla, she is clearly adopted. She is perhaps...
Now here, Stefan Molyneux, the internet broadcaster, is going to go into a very emotional rant, and I believe that this kind of emotional rant is perfectly justified. And if you're a parent with a child, raised a young child, you know the feeling of when you see a child exploited, and you see the child then reflecting a mentality of exploitation. So now she's saying she was exploited, and so now she's used to that exploitation, so she's going to become a professional porn star and get paid for what she's used to, being exploited. This is really morally outrageous, and Stefan Molyneux rightly is angry.
It's a mixed race descent, and one of the things that's true of parents as a whole, but particularly true of parents who adopt children, you've got to keep them safe. First and foremost, that is job one. One thing that you can do to keep them safe is not have them groomed, molested, and whatever the hell happened, maybe even raped by pedophiles that have access to your child. What the hell is going on in that household that for an unknown amount of time by an unknown amount of people in an unspoken manner, this child was molested by monsters, when it is the job of her parents, Kate Capshaw and Steven Spielberg, to keep her safe from just such predations. Come on.
He's right. It is ultimately the responsibility of the parents to keep their children safe from physical, mental, spiritual abuse from people. No question. So whatever the parents have to do to keep their child safe, they have to do. Whether it means moving away from Hollywood, whether it means for Spielberg to get out of the movie industry, whatever it takes to keep your child safe, you have to be able to do. And that's why Stefan Molyneux is so mad, because this happened under the supposedly watchful eye of a famous director in Hollywood, and nothing was done.
You live and work in Hollywood, everybody knows the stories, everybody knows the rumors, everybody knows what's been talked about. There are pedophiles in the industry, and you have to keep your children safe. Failure to do so is a dereliction of parental responsibility.
And by the way, I'll interrupt here. There is a documentary coming out by a teen star, Hollywood star, Corey Feldman, I believe it was. and he's going to expose the whole corrupt pedophile industry in Hollywood. So we're beginning to see some of the really cruddy, dumb, foolish, immoral, perverted things coming out of Hollywood. And it's about time Hollywood exposed itself for what it is, the corruption that it is. So that's coming out this year, and that should really, really, really expose the depth of the corruption that this whole industry has.
Responsibility of the very highest order. They also put her in boarding school, according to some reports. And that, of course, is also a risky thing. Now, I was in boarding school for a couple of years from the age of 6 onwards. Nothing bad happened to me there. I was probably too young, although, of course, I've heard the stories just like everyone else has. But who knows what happened to her in boarding school. And how do you know pedophiles to the point where they're floating around your house, having access to your children? What kind of judge of character are you? What kind of people do you allow around your children? Oh, they weren't in the family. They were outside the family. Yes, but the family let them in. Repeatedly. Because if you're groomed, that's not just a one-time thing, like some creep corners your kid in a hot tub. That groomed statement means it happened over a fairly lengthy period of time.
And it was probably someone in the industry, some executives, some producers, some people that work in the industry that had access to the Spielberg's home.
Which means that the Spielbergs know people and give access to their children to people who are pedophiles. Now, I'm not saying they knew they were pedophiles, but I don't know any pedophiles. I guarantee you I don't know any pedophiles. And nobody with any kind of creepy disposition would ever get within a million miles of my daughter. So how do you know these people? Why are they in your lives? Why are they in your home? And why do they have unfettered private access to your children? How is this possible? Are the Oscars really worth so much that you take a child, adopt a child, and then trap and expose a child to molestation and abuse? Absolutely appalling. Now, she has struggled with alcoholism. Of course, I've talked about this in my series, I'll link to it below, called The Bomb in the Brain, about how childhood abuse can take up to 20 years off your lifespan by rendering you susceptible to cancer, ischemic heart disease, to addictions, to promiscuity, to a wide variety of ill health outcomes. And so the alcoholism, which she says was so bad it almost killed her, that has been part of her past. And apparently she's saying that becoming a solo porn star actress is, and she's already started doing it. I won't get into the details, but she's already started doing it. That this is supposed to be some sort of cure. Well, of course it's not. Now, I'll put all the links to this below. This is from another report on this. Regarding your child coming to you and saying to you, I was molested as a child for many years by, I think she says plural, monsters, so many people, many years, or many months, or however long it takes to groom a child. What the hell do I know about these things? So your child comes to you and says, I'm going into porn and I was sexually abused as a child. This is a quote on how her parents took this news. Her parents are supportive of her career move. Mikayla confessed to her parents, Stephen and Kate, that she was planning on making the drastic move to adult entertainment during one of their weekend FaceTime sessions. The 23-year-old shared that her parents were intrigued, but they were not, quote, upset, end quote.
Unbelievable.
By her choice. Oof. Oh my gosh, this is not one of my shows to take a nap to. Intrigued by her choice. No mention whatsoever of how this fantastically rich and powerful couple might be doing something like going after the people who molested their child that they adopted and put in a place of danger and exploitation and molestation. No mention of, wow, I am so incredibly sorry that we took you into our home and exposed you to child sexual predators. That was our responsibility. The very least that we can do as fantastically rich, influential, and powerful people is to pour every resource that we have in this world to finding those predators and bringing them to justice. No. You see, they don't want to do any of that, or if they do, I haven't heard about it. No. You see, they're not upset by her choice. They're intrigued by her choice.
And that's one of the most unbelievable reactions to your child coming to you and saying that they want to be a porn star. And the reaction is they're intrigued. The parents are intrigued. They're not upset. They didn't throw a tantrum, a fit, and say, no way, you're not going to do that. I think sometimes young people need the parents to act the way they're supposed to act. And any decent parent would want to react in a hugely negative way to this news, not simply intrigued. Now, again, we're getting this report about what the Spielbergs did and said after they learned the news of their daughter wanting to be a porn star. And we don't actually know if this is verbatim what they said or what they thought. This is coming through second and third hand sources. But if that's their reaction, if they're so calm and so sedate and okay with it, then that is just another terrible example of this modern parenting approach where you don't ever get upset with your child, you don't ever raise your voice at your child, you don't ever show negative emotions because it might hurt their spirit, and so on and so forth. This would be even more pathetic. And that kind of attitude probably contributed to the loose and casual way people came in and out of the house and ultimately led to this girl's abuse. And now is influencing her choices as far as wanting to be a porn star. This is terrible. This is awful. And it's just a terrible wake-up call for people to remind everyone, not just parents, but everyone, this culture is corrupt. This culture is decadent. We are living in the cesspool of the modern age, and we need to get on our knees and pray and fight against it with everything we have. Well, I hope this has been an informing report, and we'll see you next week on another edition of Christ in Culture. God bless.